You ever get that feeling like the news cycle is just this relentless wave of bad stuff, basically?
Yeah.
You try to engage, you doom scroll, but it feels, I don't know, completely pointless. Like you're just watching the fire without a bucket.
Totally.
Yeah.
It confirms the doom, but gives you zero power. That's exactly the headspace we're exploring today.
Yeah, a place where trust feels, well, shaky at best. Facts are sort of up for grabs.
Mm-hmm.
And politics often seems like this big emotionally charged show with, merchandise.
It's more than just tuning out, though, right? It's almost this, like, practiced coolness, a retreat into your own comfort zone, chilling, snacking, maybe.
Right, and just kind of dismissing the bigger picture, not my circus, not my monkeys.
Exactly. And Dr. Jess, in her article, what's it called? The Rise of Skeptical Hedonism.
Yeah.
She makes such a key point.
She does. The one about how emotional survivalism kind of broke American politics.
Yeah, that one. She argues this isn't just apathy. It's exhaustion. People are burnt out, running on fumes, and grabbing onto these superficial ways to cope.
Like pretending everything's fine with, I don't know, a new gadget or ignoring the news.
Precisely. And her main argument, the really critical part, is that this numbness, this me-first survival mode,
Yeah.
it looks like resilience, but it's actually pretty harmful.
Harmful how? Like to society or?
Both, really. It chips away at our ability to act together, definitely. But also, even our own individual sense of well-being gets kind of hollowed out.
I see that. You see it in, like, wanting to just avoid all news or that need for, retail therapy just to feel some control.
Yeah, or the online snark culture.
Huh.
Mocking things instead of actually confronting them.
Yeah.
It shuts down real conversation.
But Dr. Jess does offer, like, an alternative, right? She talks about connection even though it's hard.
She does. She contrasts it with the philosophy of the Cult of Brighter Days. She's their psychological advisor, I think.
Right.
And their approach is more about active kindness, but with boundaries. Embracing failure, using humor, even channeling rage constructively is a totally different vibe.
Which is why we wanted to really, dig deep into her analysis of this skeptical hedonism.
Yeah.
And her background is pretty solid for this Doctor of Behavioral Health, Master's in Ed and Counseling, Physiology undergrad. She's looking at it from multiple angles.
Definitely. And her core idea is quite stark, isn't it? That skeptical hedonism is almost like America's new unofficial religion.
Sponsored by late capitalism, trauma fatigue, and nihilism. That's quite the mix.
It is. And she breaks it down so clearly. Skepticism, the nothing's true, trust no one part, combined with hedonism, the if it feels good now and doesn't involve, like, civic duty, just do it part.
Wow. And her conclusion is that this isn't really an ideology at all.
No, she calls it trauma in a trench coat pretending to be ideology.
Oh, yeah.
Which is quite a phrase.
It really is.
Basically, it's a defense mechanism born out of, deep existential worry, not some thought-out philosophy.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. How does she say this? Skeptical hedonism has, messed with American politics. She has 5 main points.
Right, 5 consequences.
The first one is policy as personalized tantrum management. What's that about?
It's the idea that government starts focusing less on big collective goals, a shared vision for the future, and more on soothing individual annoyances or anxieties. Like, political talk centers on validating your personal frustration right now, rather than tackling systemic issues. It's emotional bubble wrap, almost.
So less, let's build a bridge, and more, let's make sure your specific pothole feels heard.
Kind of, yeah. It shifts the focus inward, individually. Her second point is truth evicted, loyalty squatting in its place.
That's the point.
It is. But it points to this trend where what you believe isn't about facts anymore. It's about emotional connection, loyalty to your group, your leader.
So alternative facts become okay if they align with your side.
Exactly. Believing them is almost like a loyalty test, regardless of whether they hold water.
Which connects to her third point, doesn't it? Freedom becoming just don't tell me what to do, ever.
Precisely. Any sense of, like, shared responsibility your community needs evaporates.
It's freedom reduced to pure entitlement.
That's how she frames it, yeah. A rejection of any civic contract, any sense that my freedom might impact yours. It's freedom untethered.
Okay. And the fourth one, rage is the new currency. That feels very...
No. It really does. So much public discourse seems fueled by this constant, almost performative anger.
Performative is the key word there, maybe.
I think so. Her insight is that it's often not about seeking justice or actual change. It's about the dopamine hit you get from expressing outrage.
The validation of feeling angry online.
Yeah. And it feeds itself, right? Especially with social media and the 24/7 news cycle. So real action gets sidelined for just feeling angry, which is, well, dangerous.
It traps you in a loop. And the fifth consequence is pretty bleak. Winning is the only morality left.
If there's no shared truth, no common ethical ground, then the only thing that matters is coming out on top.
By any means necessary.
Essentially. The ends justify the means. If you win, you were right. Regardless of how you got there, the whole idea of a shared moral compass just kind of dissolves.
So psychologically, what does she say is driving all this? Why has this skeptical hedonism taken hold so strongly?
Well, she points to a whole bunch of things converging, like chronic uncertainty, economic worries, job insecurity.
Right.
Then there's social fragmentation. People feel more isolated. Loneliness is almost normalized. And on top of that, you have these apocalyptic vibes, as she puts it. This feeling that things are just spiraling, that the future isn't really fixable.
That sounds like trauma fatigue, just being worn down by constant stress and bad news.
Exactly. It leads to shutting down, disengaging, rather than trying to solve problems. It's a massive societal stress response.
So her point is, this isn't rational politics playing out. It's a population kind of stuck in a collective trauma response.
That's the core of her psychological explanation, yeah.
Which then brings us to her alternative. She talks about rebuilding trust.
Yes, but crucially, not a naive, blind trust. She calls it a resilient, effortful trust.
Like what? What's the analogy she uses?
Oh, like community compost or difficult but enduring friendships, things that take work, that aren't always easy, but are ultimately valuable and sustainable.
Okay, I like that. So what are the building blocks of this resilient trust, according to her?
She mentions a few key things. One is kindness with teeth.
Kindness with teeth, meaning?
It means intentional care and support, but not passively. It's active resistance against cynicism. Being supportive, but also holding boundaries, not just being a doormat.
Got it. Active bounded kindness. What else?
Patience that doesn't feel like surrender. Acknowledging change is slow, requires persistence, but without giving up hope.
That's a tough balance.
It is. And finally, creating spaces where failure is accepted and leads to inclusion, not exclusion.
Oh, that's interesting. So places where it's okay to mess up.
Yeah, where mistakes aren't career enders or reasons for exile, but chances to learn together. Fostering psychological safety, essentially.
So it's a real counter to the skeptical hedonist motto of protect yourself at all costs.
Absolutely. Her alternative is more like protect each other, even when it sucks.
That's a fundamental shift.
It really is. And she wraps up by saying skeptical hedonism is basically a symptom of deep pain and loneliness.
And the choice we face is?
Well, do we stick with that isolated, maybe smug cynicism because it feels safer? Or do we choose the messy, difficult work of collective struggle towards something better, knowing it won't be perfect?
And her warning is, if we just focus on surviving, not progressing, we lose.
That's her final word on it, yeah. Prioritizing survival over progress is ultimately a losing game.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive into Dr. Jess's work, it really comes down to understanding this pull, this almost seductive nature of skeptical hedonism.
Yeah, that feeling of nothing matters anyway, so I might as well just focus on myself.
But also recognizing its dangers. Those 5 political consequences she laid out are pretty stark reminders.
They really are. Policy is tantrum management, truth replaced by loyalty, freedom is just entitlement.
Rage as currency, and winning as the only ethic left. It paints a concerning picture.
And remembering, it stems from real psychological pressures. The instability, the isolation, that sense of impending doom.
Right. It's not happening in a vacuum. Which makes her call for a shift even more compelling, moving from self-protection to mutual care.
Building that resilient trust she talks about, even though it's hard work.
It really forces you, the listener, to think about that core choice she presents, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Do you opt for the relative ease of cynicism, or do you lean into the tougher but potentially more rewarding path of collective hope and action?
And just understanding these dynamics, Dr. Jess outlines seeing skeptical hedonism at play that feels like a really important first step.
Recognizing it in the world, maybe even, in ourselves sometimes. Have you ever caught yourself just wanting to check out when things feel overwhelming?
Oh, definitely. It's easy to slip into that. It helps to have a name for it, to see the pattern.
Yeah, it encourages that kind of honest reflection. Where might I be leaning into cynicism or performative anger instead of connection.
Which brings us back to that final thought she leaves us with. How do we actually do it? How do we cultivate kindness with teeth?
Or build those spaces where failure earns you a seat. In our own lives, our communities, our workplaces.
It's not like there's an easy answer, is there?
No, it's definitely an ongoing question, something to keep exploring. But her analysis gives us a really useful framework for thinking about it.
A reminder, maybe, that choosing connection and hope, even when it's difficult, is actually a pretty radical act right now.
It really is a deliberate choice against the grain.